Welcome into another episode here on Zion Media, and I have a really exciting episode to show you. I think it's going to be taking a look at a couple things that I've been noticing. Um, for starters, Greg Matson did a awesome couple of episodes, and I find it interesting too because the Haystack, who a long time ago, when Trevor was still on, we had like a key clutchers series, or we were talking about key clutchers, and it was just taking not at the scriptures of the drunkards of Ephraim in the book of Isaiah, and so Haystack had actually gotten involved in that, and it created a little bit of drama. But since then, he's made right with like Latter Day Chad, and he's not. He even did an episode, which I'm a little disappointed. John, if you are watching, I was a little disappointed that you didn't mention me. And we've actually gotten a little bit of also drama from some other smaller channels. So there's the Haystack, but then there's folks, uh, I guess, that have some YouTube channels that I find really interesting. I haven't responded to those yet, which I plan on doing. But I guess there's a Scooby YouTube channel. I've never heard of them. And but I mean, I never heard of them until they started coming in our chats or comments, putting a lot of negative comments in there. But it's interesting because I'm bringing up Haystack and Greg Matson because they're kind of starting to sound like Zion Media, calling out stuff that they are seeing doesn't quite make sense. Now, I attest and testify that this is the Lord's church that we're involved in, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. But a lot of the things that are happening, I don't think people are aware or realize. And I think it has something to do with being pioneer stock. I'm not really sure. But for whatever reason, Latter-day Saints, us as a people, have not realized that the scriptures are talking about us for the longest time. We think that the scriptures are talking about us in a certain way, but not in other ways as well, like Isaiah, drunkards of Ephraim. We've talked about that on the channel quite a bit. But we also don't realize that even Doctrine and Covenants talks about us. The Book of Mormon talks about us negatively. And it's even in with Christ's own words when he's talking about the Gentiles that won't accept the fullness of the gospel. It's not talking about people outside of the church, because the people outside of the church, they're not going to see the Book of Mormon like the Latter-day Saints will. But the reason why I bring this up is because, um, there was a post that was shared on the church's Facebook page, the official church page, Facebook page, about a young man by the name of Pono, and he's an artist. He's actually a designer, and this post featured his life a little bit about being a fashion designer, and it shows, or at least portrays, that he makes fashion for women, and that he learned how to sew from the Relief Society. But what's peculiar about this article that the church made on their, or at least this content post, is that one, it was posted on the last day of Pride Month. It was just basically snuck in there right before the end of the month. So the church would have an official Pride Month post. And then, now, even though it doesn't feature any of Pono's personal life, it does. One, LDS Living actually made an extensive article about Pono's life. But the thing about this odd post is that Pono doesn't shy away from his orientation, if I could say that.
How's it? My name is Pono. I am a senior fashion student at Parsons, and I am from Hawaii. Throughout my experience working with various different brands, aesthetics, designers, and different parts of the world, I've come to understand that good design comes from within. I've also learned how to work fast, trust my intuition, and rely on mentors. It is now time to settle down and focus on my own work through my thesis. Interns, so if you're interested, hit me up. Happy Sabbath.
Happy Sabbath.
We're in the streets of New York. We're seeing what these girls are wearing. And come with us. Let's go.
I looked out the window and what?
What are you wearing? Take us head to toe.
The boots are Ricoans.
Wow, tasteful Ricoans.
Tasteful Rico.
The ties from Jake the suits from Joseph A. Banks.
Coca-Cola, hello.
I've worn a couple of low-cut tops, and that's when I've had the best conversations.
Somebody pray for Pastor, he fell into temptation.
I think it is confirmed. New York.
And the concern that Greg Matson actually conveyed is that where is the proclamation to the family? What message does this actually convey when we have the proclamation of the family that has very clear, distinct message, a very distinct message about a man and a woman's role and the importance of a family? If you're highlighting a Latter-day Saint that has, plays for the other team, to say the least, if you're highlighting it, then what are you trying to say? And now I would encourage you go watch Greg Matson's video. In fact, I have a lot of respect for him to actually speak up about this, because again, we're in a day and age where the major test we're in a test right now. We're in a major test where Latter-day Saints are going to have to decide, do they trust in the arm of the flesh, or do they trust in the arm of Jesus? And that's the crazy thing, is a lot of Latter-day Saints would say, of course, we trust in Jesus. I have a testimony of Jesus. Yet at the same time, if we're saying things like, follow the prophet, or that he won't lead you astray, or that only truth, like only the prophet can get revelation for the whole world, or only new scripture is going to come from the proper lines of authority, or there's people that are texting me concerned about Zion Media because they think that we're not being faithful Latter-day Saints, yet they don't realize that they're putting their trust in the arm of flesh. See, what does it look like when you put your trust in the arm of Jesus? Well, first off, you read the scriptures and you take seriously the words of Isaiah. You take seriously the Book of Mormon, as Ezra Taft Benson realized the church wasn't taking seriously. In fact, President Ezra Taft Benson implied, or I think he was probably a little more than implying, making clear that the church is under condemnation for not taking seriously the Book of Mormon. And so trusting the arm of Jesus means that when you read Isaiah and the Book of Mormon, you realize, even if you if you have a testimony of the Book of Mormon and also of Joseph Smith, you will even consider the words in the Doctrine and Covenants. You'll also consider the other works that Joseph Smith had did before his martyrdom, and you'll realize that the great and spacious building, in part, a big part of it is potentially talking about our church. And it's hard for me to say this. It's crazy to think that I actually am saying this, because I'm also in the same boat as Latter-day Saints, realizing, holy smokes, this whole time the scriptures have been talking about us, warning about us in the last days. And so Greg Matson is realizing it. The Haystack, Jonathan, is realizing something's not right. And we realize now we've got the brethren and we've got the corporation side of the church. And the corporation is running a lot of stuff. The brethren are a group of senior citizens, actually. And for them to know every single thing, a lot of people say that it's like impossible because they are men, and I would say they are the arm of flesh. And now, would I say that they're inspired? I mean, I think that they definitely can be inspired. They are the appointed people. And if you recall our live stream with Jerome sharing Jerem, I want to say Jerome, like he's a black guy, but Jerem, his revelation that he received and read on the live stream with Shane, um, basically reveals that the Lord still considers the 12 apostles as his appointed servants. He even refers to Elder Bednar as the servant. And so I stand with Jesus Christ and I stand with the brethren. I will call out concerns that I have, things that don't make sense. And maybe some of the confusions there on purpose. So that way the members of the church can discern who they really should be following. See, the prophet, the term follow the prophet or the phrase follow the prophet should be simply, hey, they are the guides. They are supposed to be pointing us to Jesus. And yes, they do make mistakes or have made mistakes. I wonder if some of those mistakes have been made publicly and they haven't been discerned as mistakes. Yet at the same time, they are our guides, and we still need to have the Holy Ghost close to us, like President Nelson said before his passing. So I'm going to show you a couple things that I find really intriguing to basically build off of what Greg Matson and Haystack have been talking about.
And it seems to me like they kind of slipped it in there. Somebody slipped it in there at the very end of the last day of Pride Month. And this is not the first time that this story has been told. A year ago, almost exactly, LDS Living had profiled this young man as well. So it's not something new that they just happened to put out. It's something that they already knew about. Someone already knew about. And they decided to put it out yesterday on June 30th. And all these different things going on. Now, there might be a little nuance in there, but to some degree, it is not nuance. When you've got images on this account of two men kissing each other, and you've got pride all over it, then you've got to wonder, is this the right person to put up in a profile twice now? Last year and this year, LDS Living, and now the official social media church account. And what message is that telling people? What is that telling young people about? Do we want to confuse them more, as if they're not already completely confused about our messaging?
For starters, I want to actually show this video. So this is a video by the Rogue Lawyer, and the video is actually what I got really inspired me to make this video, because it's talking about how there is a city or town that basically wanted to be in support of Muslims, and they're a very liberal town. And so what they have is, I guess, throughout the year, gay pride flags and support of, I guess the whole LGBTQ movement. And so then they grouped in the Muslims as well. So you have the Muslims also included in their movement, their progressiveness. But at the same time, what ends up happening, and you'll see this in the video,
They banned the pride flag. So now you have an all-Muslim city council and mayor, and now they've taken down all the pride flags. One of the best examples, I think, of suicidal empathy happening in real time is a town in Michigan called Hamtramck, and I believe it was the first town in the United States that authorized the Muslim call to prayer in the morning. The liberal people in that town wanted to protect Muslim rights. There was a whole bunch of people from Bangladesh coming into the town, and these were the people who were very much pro-LGBTQ+. So they welcomed tons of refugees into their small town, who eventually became the majority. And then what happened is you got the first mayor from this country. City council became all Muslim. It's an example of, you have to be careful of the unintended consequences of good intentions. Because what happened in that town this year is that they banned the pride flag. So now you have an all Muslim city council and mayor, and now they've taken down all the pride flags. And the liberal women who were behind this whole movement are now like, what's going on? And now they're being completely rebuked. And it reminds me of communism, where the agitators and the revolutionaries are just useful idiots for the people who want to take power. And whether it's communists, people from a different country or worldview, take a look at that town. Tell me what you think about it, because I think that is a little microcosm of what could happen on a grand scale in Europe and North America if we're not sure about making sure people share our values before we put them in a position to take over. Here's a story of how a liberal town that was very pro-LGBTQ went to a town that now bans Pride Month and pride flags.
What you see in the video is that the Muslims that were brought in because of their inclusiveness, I guess you could say, and the Muslims became leaders of this town, and ultimately took over the town and banned everything that these folks were being progressive for. And now the town is basically a Muslim town. So it's mind blowing to think that these folks were used, quote unquote, as useful idiots. They were basically their good intentions and their willingness to just try and give and include and invite towards this cause caused them to lose everything that they stood for. And now they're silenced. They can't say anything about it. They basically lost their town. And so it's a perfect display of what happens when you not only trust too much in the good intentions of others, assuming too much that other people agree with your cause or your position, but it's also a really great example of what happens when we don't have this stand of understanding the scriptures or taking seriously. So it's a good example of what could happen if we just trust too much that everybody in the church has good intentions towards other members of the church. Okay. And so that's where you start to see creeping in this inclusivity on Pride Month of this post of Pono. And so here's a couple of examples of what Greg Matson was talking about in this Latter-day in this LDS post. You can see I'm editing it right here. You can see how you have Pono being very clear about his stance. He almost conveys that he's struggling with same-sex attraction with his business or his product line or his clothing line, and he's communicating to other Latter-day Saints that are also gay. But then you also have his how he presents himself. It's very clear that he's gay and he supports being gay. But I don't know. He doesn't say that he has a husband. He doesn't say that he's having any relations with others. And maybe he's just being gay while keeping the law of chastity, for instance. But either way, you do see that in some of the clothing line or the brand that you have folks wearing this clothing of two people of the same gender kissing of different kind, both men and women.
It smells a little bit like in some of these posts that there is simply we're going to go along with what the world is teaching here in the name of inclusiveness. Now, and so it's odd for a church account to be advocating for something that is the opposite of what is taught in the Family Proclamation, and doing it at its universities as well. And this, and in a world where the philosophies of men and the destruction of gender, the destruction of marriage, the destruction of family, the destruction of femininity, the destruction of masculinity is happening all around us, to join in on those types of things is very concerning to me. I don't.
You even have the visual of the Boy Scouts, which is even more shocking. If anything, it's I'm an artist, I'm a designer as well. If I were in his shoes, I would be making a statement with something like that. to take my Mormon background and then have a T-shirt of 2 Boy Scouts kissing, I would definitely be. If I made that, it would have been for the shock and awe, and also to change that depiction. And a lot of people realize, since the church had separated themselves from the Boy Scouts of America, that it was because of the Boy Scouts of America's agenda to basically allow this whole either transgenderism, the LGBTQ movement. I mean, what's going on there? Like, boys should be separated only with boys, and there shouldn't be any inappropriateness going on. There's also a lot of history with Boy Scouts or Scout leaders being around children, and then you also have the Girl Scouts being inclusive to transgenders as well. So I don't, it's you no longer could say I don't know what's happening here. There's clearly an intent, and if you haven't figured it out too, like, it's part of the adversary's plan. I don't know. As a church, we're not talking about that enough. The adversary's plan is to destroy families. That's what we were saying all the time with the proclamation to the family. And if he could demean men, and like right now, there's a rise of women, which I am in support of that. Yet at the same time, we don't need to do it while we're pushing down men. And then you also have this attack on the family by confusing children and not having those male role models have their position, and also making it so that women get everything. It's just this, we already are in the thick of it. And then to have the church basically highlighting a Latter-day Saint that does not support the focus of the proclamation of the family, it's clear something's going on. And I've had this whole theme of the wheat and the tares. The wheat and the tares is to help us to be aware that we have tares in the church. Ezra Taft Benson said it, with his J. Reuben Clark quote. He also said it at his BYU address. He also, it's not just him, but then there's also, other messaging that makes it really clear that, so we're not quite. I mean, we're going the wrong direction. Latter-day Chad has talked about Gordon Bowen a number of times, and then we also have the numerous LDS abuse cases that have been in the news of people who are Latter-day Saints or Latter-day Saint leaders, and also some questionable close ties with the brethren, and not just Gordon Bowen, but also the seemingly big concern that they're not doing anything about these associates. And some people have been excommunicated. You can say that that's something to be done, but then there's a lot of questions on, okay, what else is happening? And so let me go ahead and move forward here. I want you to be able to see just an example of this. So in the news, we've seen, and maybe not all of you have seen this, but some of us have seen the programming that the media has tried to do.
Hi, I'm Fox San Antonio's Jessica Headley.
And I'm Ryan Wolf.
Our greatest responsibility is to serve our
Treasure Valley communities,
the El Paso, Las Cruces communities, Eastern Iowa communities,
Mid-Michigan communities.
We are extremely proud of the quality, balanced journalism that CBS 4 News produces.
But we are concerned about the trouble and treatment of irresponsible, one-sided news stories
plaguing our country.
The sharing of biased and false news has become all too common on social media. More alarming, some media outlets publish these same fake stories without checking facts first.
The sharing of biased and false
news has become all too common on social media.
More alarming, some media outlets publish these same fake stories without checking facts first.
Unfortunately, some members of the media use their platforms to push their own personal bias and agenda to control exactly what people think. And this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
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 Local news networks all saying the same message, not just locally in one specific area, but in multiple areas. And so I just want you to be able to see this. And then you have CNN trying to convey that, oh, this is just a regular, thing. This is a regular, like they're just trying to convey the message. Basically, trying to take the eyes off of what they're doing.
There's a lot of attention around Sinclair Broadcasting and its conservative bent. This is a company that owns stations all across the country. And last month I reported that the company was mandating its local stations to produce these media bashing promos. There's been a lot of angst in local newsrooms about this. Now we're actually seeing the promos. I think you get the idea there, what's going on. All these anchors and all these markets are required to read this script. It's attacking fake news, but really what it's doing, it's kind of like the Fox Fair and Balanced slogan. It's a way of saying, we're fair, everybody else is biased.
And see, we're so caught up in Babylon. It's part of the system. Is when you're going to school or going to work and you have very little time at home to study or research, like my in-laws, for instance, they have a really hard time to be able to slow down and actually catch up with everything that's going on social media, especially the older generation who isn't on the internet like millennials and younger generations are. And so you've got the older generations that are just too caught up in Babylon to be able to slow down. And then you have the younger generation that is even less educated than the older generation. And so everybody's wrapped up in something and not able to see all of this. My hope is that I can be able to convey the same message. You can see it happening even at the millennial or Gen Zer level, like on X. You see the same thing as the news clip I just showed. And then there's some other interesting things. For instance, you have a bunch of stuff that's happening right under our noses because we're not paying attention. And see, I'm concerned a little bit, because I get messages of people that are concerned about Zion Media. They're concerned about Shane and Chad. They're concerned about just the direction of our channel. But there's also people in the comments that will say that this stuff, like if we're not faithful Latter-day Saints, that's when you say that phrase, first off, you are trusting too much in the arm of flesh. What we should be is faithful Jesus followers and recognize that this is Jesus's church. But being a faithful Latter-day Saint shouldn't be the priority. It should be being a faithful follower of Christ, representing his name. But that also means that we do the work of the Father. We do the things he is talked about, like study Isaiah, which makes us aware of the state of the church today. Again, we will stand for the church. Shane has multiple times said that he is a Latter-day Saint. The covenants that he makes, even if the church pushes them away, he will keep doing those. We will still keep telling people that they need to go to church. They should go to the temple. They should wear their garments. Absolutely wear your garments. I wear my garments. I go to church. And also, I believe in all of these things, not just by belief alone. It's by my testimony and witness of the Book of Mormon and also of the existence of God, the reality of God. But at the same time, because of my testimony with my dream and my witness of the Book of Mormon, I take seriously the Book of Mormon. It is only because of the Book of Mormon that I even know who Christ is. And so because of that, I also realized that the words of Isaiah and Christ pointing us to Isaiah and Joseph Smith's teaching in section 85 and section 101 and all of these sections of the Doctrine and Covenants are serious. So I don't gloss over. We all shouldn't gloss over the words of Isaiah and the Doctrine and Covenants. We should all take it very seriously. And so I want to show you just of some other clips too. Like, we've had Michael B. Rush talk about how we basically give our faith to the brethren.
That perspective on the gospel, that if there is something important to know, that the prophet will tell them that. Meanwhile, if you look at what the invitations that the prophet has extended to us, he has incredible invitations to us, right? Like he says, he invites us, he says, listen, you need to do the spiritual work necessary to receive the revelations.
I think our whole church was built on a 14-year-old boy that was curious, that had a question.
Yeah.
Okay.
What would the restored gospel look like if not for the questions that Joseph Smith continually asked? So many of the bombshell doctrines that we have.
The Lord in your personal life. He's given us all kinds of invitations like that. What President Nelson rarely does is expound these incredible doctrines and tell us all the things that we're supposed to know about them. He gives us these invitations, and it's up to us to act on them. I mean, he's given incredible invitations to.
And we don't really do the due diligence of work and studying. And we are basically, because we're wrapped up in Babylon, we're losing, the sight of what's happening. We can see what's happening in the news with the world, and we're just like, oh, yep, we're in the last days. We're prepared. We're aware of that happening. But at the same time, there's stuff happening right under our noses, right in our backyards that, are very peculiar. And this is why I made the episode of calling out the tares in the church. I think we're just, I don't want to use this word, but I don't think we're mad enough, and it's not about being angry. It's about the words of Joseph Smith when he said that we should be as wise as serpents and as gentle as lamb. A serpent definitely knows and is able to read the room. A serpent is able to know everybody that's in their ward, everybody, that everything that's going on. A serpent is able to know what they need to do to be able to get an upper hand on their enemies. But oddly enough, we're sheep. We're sheep in the church, and we basically trust the shepherd to lead, and we have appointed shepherds, and we have appointed shepherds that are unfortunately wolves. And so when we're not looking, the wolves take what they want. And there's also another reference to, the adversary being a lion and seeking prey. And all, in truth, we've been under the leadership of a lion on this planet, a lion like that, like the adversary. I'm not saying that the church leaders are evil lions. I'm saying that we live in a world where basically we're surrounded by predators. We're surrounded by, like, just on this animal theme, we're surrounded by predators. And the concern is that we're not taking enough effort to pay attention to what's going on around us. And so, but a serpent knows the other predators. A serpent knows what's, like I said, what's going on. And, when it comes to being as gentle as a lamb, see, the predators, or at least the serpent, doesn't necessarily take action. And in fact, what we ought to do is consider ourselves as lions, as it says in 3rd Nephi. Because in 3rd Nephi, when Christ gives that comparison of the lion among beasts and the lion among sheep, the references of those scriptures are both specifically talking about what it's specifically talking about, um about taking the sheep, yes, tearing them up, but taking them also to safety. And so I ponder that a lot, and I will probably continue to talk about that, because that verse, or those verses, are referring to people that have decided that they're not going to take it anymore, and they're going to cause a stir. In truth, that's really what it is. Even though Ezra Taft Benson talked about, not causing strife in the church, there still is this tearing up among the sheep that happens by the mouth of a lion, a young lion. And so it's like it's meant to happen. And if we speak against it, then we're probably the ones with our heads in the sand. We're the sheep that are protecting the wolves in sheep's clothing. And um it's purposeful. The point is so that we can take them to safety. Take the faithful Latter-day Saints, take the ones that don't know what to trust or who to trust. And so there's a couple other things I want to show you here. So this is interesting. There was a couple that there was a couple, Charlie Bird and Ryan Clifford, that are a gay couple. They are just a gay couple. They're married. And there's another Latter-day Saint that's pretty popular. I haven't met them, but I see them in my Facebook feed that had them over for a fireside to speak. And now I don't know who they spoke to. I hope it wasn't youth, because it definitely would be confusing for youth that they were having this gay couple that was married. And again, this completely goes against the proclamation to the family. There is more that's gone on with, like, David Archuleta. David Archuleta's mother's, Latin woman, wanting to be supportive of her son. And I can understand, being supportive, but where's her testimony? What is her testimony on Jesus and the Book of Mormon and Joseph Smith, or was her testimony on the brethren? And this is my concern about having a testimony on the brethren. See, following the prophet and being a faithful Latter-day Saint sounds like people who have testimonies on the brethren. And like, I don't denounce, I don't, disagree with them being appointed leaders. I would say follow the prophet. And if the prophet's pointing us to Jesus, definitely follow the prophet. If the prophet, though, is telling us not to pray, like Elder Runlin, or if the prophet is telling us that we shouldn't be seeking for an Alma the Younger experience, which I had before I even knew what Alma the Younger was, then I'm concerned about that. I think that might be a mistake, because it's the Alma the Younger's experience that we have that will help fuel our motivation and drive to be faithful Latter-day Saints. In fact, not just faithful Latter-day Saints, the kind of Latter-day Saints that takes the gospel to all the world. Like, we should be like Paul. We should be like Ammon and Alma and Amulek. We should be like, Alma the Elder. When I say Alma, I'm talking about Alma the Younger, but we also should be like Alma the Elder. We should be like all of these people that are great examples. I mean, I remember seminary. Seminary taught me that these were my heroes. Like, I want to be like Nephi. I want to be like Joseph Smith. And I want to be like Moses. And Moses even said that would God that all men would be prophets. And so it's intended that God wants us all to be prophets. And the church's own definition of prophets is, in the Bible dictionary, a person who has a testimony of Jesus. And so if you have a testimony of Jesus, then you're qualified to be a prophet. And we're taught also by Moroni and Paul to seek the best spiritual gifts, to covet them. And so having spiritual gifts and a testimony of Jesus would make us a prophet, according to the church's dictionary, Bible dictionary. And so, when we are looking at this culture, though, it is counter this teaching, counter teaching of the Bible, counter teaching of the Book of Mormon. And the culture teachings are that only all truth can come from the prophet. Except the problem is that, see, there's another thing that we do as Latter-day Saints, is that whoever the modern living prophet today is trumps all of the prophets of before. That's a cultural thing. There is no scripture that says that. Otherwise, the entire Bible and Book of Mormon would be obsolete, and that we should be living on every word of the prophet. That is a false doctrine. Absolutely.
The Lord said that he was going to visit the Mormon church. And I saw a splitting of the Mormon church. I saw a major splitting of the Mormon church, and it was not what that would fall.
In fact, it's crazy because we have people like Brandon Biggs, and then this other dude that we showed on live stream that are sharing that they're receiving revelation about the LDS Church and about Utah. And as Latter-day Saints, we dismiss them just like the Jews in Jerusalem dismissed any warnings of the prophets of their day. Again, Jeremiah, we're taught that there were many prophets during the time of Jeremiah. Why would there be many prophets if the high priest was the person that would actually? I mean, do we think about how this all was structured and how this all worked? Like Lehi, we consider him and revere him as a prophet, yet we we dis we think of it as if Lehi was leading a people like our church. And yes, this is a restored church, yet we still follow the patterns for whatever reason of the Old Testament. We're still following the patterns of the Book of Mormon, where the Nephites, their pride and the thought process, thinking that they were invincible because they had all these safeguards that I've mentioned in another video, where we basically, because we have patriarchal blessings, the gift of the Holy Ghost, the priesthood, we live in Utah, we have all these, we have the prophet and the 12 apostles, the 70 bishop and stake presidents, we've got church programs that are actually, interestingly enough, not supporting men, like what Greg Matson said. But we have all these things and we leave our pride in this structure, which is basically a bubble of what we consider sometimes safety. You know, uh, it's the happy bubble, I guess. As when I first moved to Utah, I heard it referred to as the I guess maybe the Mormon bubble, the happy bubble, Happy Valley. That's what it is, the Happy Valley bubble, because we live here in Utah and. We everybody's a Mormon just about. We can go on the bus and talk about Jesus, talk about the Book of Mormon right on the bus, and someone totally understands and can smile and bear testimony along with you. But at the same time, we we our bubble has been altered a little bit. Um, and it's kind of crazy. We're just in this space. And so I hope that some of these video examples conveys a little bit of what I'm trying to share here. But I also want to show you something very interesting. So, this is a little bit of what I'm talking about. So, see, we know about the scriptures, and I hate to hit this over and over again, but a few of the things that I want to make sure that I at least touch on will help prepare me for what I'm about to share with you. And so, we do trust in the arm of flesh. Cursed is he that putteth his trust in the arm of flesh, Second Nephi chapter 4:34. And, that man should not trust in the arm of flesh. That's Doctrine and Covenants, section 1, verse 19. And Ezekiel 34 talks about how the Lord is not pleased with the shepherds. But we've also got Brandon Biggs and this other, Christian minister, I believe he is, on a podcast talking about some things that are coming to Utah. We've even had Mike Rigby talk about his dreams about Utah getting hit with a solid earthquake. The church has made the Salt Lake Temple safe for a shaking, yet this shaking I don't think is going to hit us harder than we actually realize. Then you have the parables. So like Matthew 13, that the watchman slept, in the parable of the wheat and the tares. And the field, in a lot of cases, is the world. And there's another reference of falling asleep in section 86 of the Doctrine and Covenants. And then more references to the watchman in section 101. So you've heard this over and over again, and I hope that you are studying these things, that you're pondering over these things and praying for your own revelation. Because don't take my word for it. I might be saying that something's up with the brethren, and I'll be very clear. I will stand, like I said, with in support of the brethren, but I also will challenge the brethren, and I have no problem challenging that, because if they are, see, what the truth is we have a great example in the Book of Mormon. During the wars, we have the chief judge during the wars, Captain Moroni, had thought or assumed that this chief judge, and I think it's Pontius or Pontius, or not Pontius Pilate, but this chief judge was holding supplies away from Captain Moroni and his soldiers. But when he sent this scathing letter, because he doesn't know, he's out there in the battlefield, Captain Moroni, and he doesn't know why supplies isn't coming. And so he has to make this letter to the chief judge. And you know what the chief judge did? And see, the brethren should be happy that I'm saying these words. Okay, you gotta understand, is the chief judge sent a letter back to Captain Moroni, happy that that's where Moroni's heart was, because Moroni's heart was to the people of Nephi and to Christ Jesus. And so when the chief judge got those words, he sent word back, basically saying that, hey, I'm happy that this is where you're at, but this is why we haven't been able to send any support. And here I am, David the Lion Douglas, on Zion Media, giving full space for the brethren to speak up and to call out what's going on and to make an official statement. And until then, I'm going to be like Captain Moroni, and I will call out the heinous and bizarre activities of hanging out with Gordon Bowen at Disneyland. Like, all this stuff is nonsense. I don't get what's going on. We're doing gay posts. Again, no offense to those that are homosexual. Like, I love you just like Jesus would love you. But Jesus is instead of the proclamation to the family. And then the Minha also teaches us what we should do for folks that are dealing with that. And in my opinion, like the Book of Mormon says, like Samuel the Lamanite says, is that the Nephites were surrounded by demons. And I think that goes same for the Latter-day Saints, is that we have pride, and we are discovering, like President Benson had said, we have the worst among us that are the folks that are doing these Jeffrey Epstein level things. And so then you also have, hear me as a man on a hill or on a wall, basically calling out the brethren that, hey, speak up, say something. And their response, see, so many of our negative commenters are saying, you need to be faithful Latter-day Saints. I am being a faithful Latter-day Saint. And a faithful Latter-day Saint is one that would call out the hypocrisy and the evil darkness that is surrounding us, and that we shouldn't be taking a blind eye or a tolerance to the kind of behavior that is Gordon Bowen and all this other crazy stuff. And so the brethren should be saying, thank you, David the Lion Douglas. In fact, they should have said it. The Nephites should have said that to Samuel the Lamanite. Yet they didn't. In fact, they shot arrows at him, and he had to, can deliver his message and then flee off the wall before they got him. And so you see stuff like that. We're the Nephites. In fact, I would actually say that the reason why Moroni and Mormon compiled the Book of Mormon the way it is because they saw in vision that the Latter-day Saints would be like the Nephite people. And the reason why Jesus says that he hopes basically that the Gentiles won't, reject the fullness of the gospel is because they're going to be like the Nephites, who rejected the prophets and stoned them and killed them. And this is throughout the Book of Mormon. So let's take a closer look at what's going on here. And so you actually have some interesting imagery. You have, basically this concern of Brandon Biggs' words, like this split, this division. Why is he getting this word? And
President Benson said, "Oh, Stan," he said, "come here." And he went over and he pulled the curtain back and he pointed down to the church headquarters and he said, "There are more people in that building that I am more afraid of than anybody in Washington, D.C." And then later, I got to talk with Stan's son, and Stan's son and I actually repeated this story just to make sure that it was, pretty close to that. And he said, "That's almost word for word how my father told me this story." And so it was me and my wife, and then also Stan's son.
And then you also have Kevin Kraut saying that Ezra Taft Benson's massage therapist, heard Benson say himself that he's more concerned about what would happen in a church office building. It's kind of crazy. I do want to say that the church is speaking in symbols. The church has something going on, and I want to say it's in a good way. Um, and this might seem like it's a tangent, but it's gonna tie in just a moment. So the temples are very, very interesting structures. As you look at the temple, you can see symbols. Like the Salt Lake Temple is going to come out, and you'll be able to pay attention to those symbols again of the highest kingdom, the middle kingdom, to the celestial, terrestrial, and telestial kingdoms are all displayed in the temple. There's a lot of symbols throughout history that all are seen in the temple itself about getting a new name, being able to ascend, to get higher covenants to be able to make. You can also look at the top of the conference center. The top of the conference center is actually quite interesting. You can see that there's some sort of levels, some ascending. There's this like central point at the top of the design of the temple or the conference center. That is very, very interesting. And you know that the designers of these things like are paying attention and they're including this. Oddly enough, even the church's logo has some geometry to it, which I find interesting because, one, if you ever noticed, Christ is wearing the robes on the left shoulder, oddly enough, which is a lesser priesthood. And also this logo was actually designed by Gordon Bowen. It's already been established and documented that Gordon Bowen, was the one that actually worked on this logo. And Gordon Bowen's been around for a long time. When you look at the conference center, just the way that it's designed is actually quite amazing. You've got these circular shapes and this arch, and now of course it's like an auditorium. It's a massive auditorium, so of course it's designed that way. But then there's these other spaces that continue this circular type shape or this, thing that they have going on. And I wonder if the brethren are even aware. I'm sure they've got to be privy to this. It's not by accident. But what I find also is this same circular shape is actually outside the church office building. And I did the screen recording, and you're going to see right away some symbols that are very, very familiar. And I would hate to say a little too familiar, because when you look at this, you can see that there is something odd going on in this little area. And you got to wonder, why is it that it's designed like this? Why is it this shape? Like they could have designed it anyway. And yes, I did a little deep dive on the history of this building. It's actually quite remarkable to see the actual design of this building. Um, but the thing is that there's these other symbols in here that are too crazy to ignore, because you basically have what looks like a penis here, and another penis, but a much smaller one, pointing into a circle. And then when you look at the church office building, it's basically this tower that has these two globes right at the base. And you basically have three penises right here around this circle. Um, and it's very, very bizarre because um, if you consider the fact that one is a very large penis, um, the other one's a small penis. Um, and that doesn't seem like it's the kind of a penis that would be for, a short man. Um, unless that man is under 18. So the thing here is, it's just crazy to be actually talking about this. I'm a little concerned about it because I look at these other symbols and how the church allows their designers to pay attention to the geometry, and maybe some would say the sacred geometry, and then all of a sudden have right at the church office building this other type of geometry that's very suspicious. And you know, it just kind of leads to, what is it that we're doing in the world? What is the purpose of all of this? Because right now, the world is just going ahead and just creating a ton of different drama. They definitely don't care about the proclamation of the family. We've discovered secret works of darkness for the country, the United States of America, supporting someone like Jeffrey Epstein for as long as it has through the 80s, 90s, and even 2000s. And even though that Jeffrey Epstein has been outed, a lot of people still are unsure about what's going on. They think that for whatever reason that he's dead, and it's just this being wrapped up in Babylon situation where they don't have enough time to actually do the research. Um, and honestly, I think more than anything, we should be studying the words of Isaiah because at least we're going to do some scripture study every morning or every night. And our study should be on catching up with Isaiah. Instead of skipping over Isaiah, we should be catching up with Isaiah. Um, you know, I I've shared a lot of things on here, um, and really it kind of wraps up down to this question because there's a video I showed at the beginning where, like I said, this town, this community was very inclusive and supportive of progressive ideas, but then ended up getting taken over by someone that they didn't realize was an enemy. I wonder if we're in the same situation where we're not paying attention and we're not aware of the enemy and how much the enemy has taken over. Um, I think that there will be a split in the church, a fracture, you could say. Chad says that. But I think that there's going to be a major divide, and it's a good divide because what the Lord said at the very beginning is he said, "Let there be light." Actually, before he said that is he divided the light from the darkness. And I think that the Church of Jesus Christ, of Latter-day Saints, I specifically asked the Lord to send me where he wanted me to be. And I think that he sent me here for this work, but it also sent me here along with many of you that are watching this so that we all could be a part of the divide because the Lord, again, is separating the light from the darkness. Thank you so much for watching this episode. Please be sure to subscribe and go ahead and comment. I would love to hear your words, even if it's negative. And you know, I make my cell phone available. I've actually gotten better at replying to people. And so if you have questions, any kind of questions, I know Scooby Doo from that podcast thinks I've gone astray, yet even Scooby Doo is welcome to text me and hear the truth from my own mouth. And I invite everybody to ask your questions, whether it's my personal life, whether it's about why I'm doing this with Zion Media. But one thing I would say is don't rely on the arm of flesh, and that includes your own wisdom, because the Lord has counseled us to not trust in our own wisdom. But basically, we should study it out in our mind. Even as Oliver was taught by Joseph Smith, we should study it out in our mind, and then we should pray to know if it's true. That's part of discernment. That's what we should be doing. Just because we see something that doesn't make sense to us doesn't mean that we should just throw it out. It was the same thing I did with Shane Baldwin. And that is that when I started hearing these stories, especially after getting kicked out of a group that thanks to Declare My Word, Kemp, who is this, I'm not sure if he's a bishop still, but this bishop that was leading that, he kicked me out of the group thread just because I was in a photo with Shane. And we were studying Isaiah of all things. He definitely didn't do his due diligence. Maybe he was following Elder Runland's words. Like he just decided, oh, there's an ex-convict, and there's David, this Ancient Answers account. Let me just go ahead and kick him out. The truth is that that's not how you discern. You discern by studying it out in your mind, hearing all sides, and then praying after you've kind of discerned or decided, okay, what's right, what's wrong. Some people just like the seeds, the parable of the sower, there are a lot of seeds that are planted, and some are thrown by the wayside, some on stony ground, some are choked up through the thorns. But then there's some that land on good ground. The ones that actually do a little bit of searching, but they never pray. Some that do some searching and pray, but then don't stick around. And then there's those that obviously dismiss Zion Media and unsubscribe. But then there's those that are still watching even to the end of this video. Those are the ones I would say are going to be a part of the light when the Lord separates the light from the dark, and in preparation of his return. Thank you so much for watching, and comment below, and tell me, how are you going to be a lion? How are you going to be a part of when the Lord comes back? He's going to want to see himself in us, but he's not going to be looking for a bunch of sheep. He's going to be looking for a bunch of lions. How are you going to be a lion?
And this is where I'm going to tell you what I saw concerning the Mormon church. The Lord said that he was going to visit the Mormon church. And I saw a splitting of the Mormon church. I saw a major splitting of the Mormon church, and it was not what it would fall. This was divided. These people and these people, there was two different directions. This side over here it went with false doctrine still. And I'm going to tell you, I love the Mormon people. You're good people, but you believe a false gospel. You have false teaching. And the Lord said, they're good people, Brandon. There are good people in the Mormon church, in the LDS, but they have false doctrine. And he said to me, I'm going to visit them, and I'll manifest myself to them. And when I do, the glory will come on them, and there'll be a major harvest of souls and revival in the LDS. But he said they will not all receive it. And it will split, and there will be, they will stay the same, but they will start a new branch, a new church will come out of the LDS, a new church. And he said, this will be a sign of the end times. What's about to happen?
Where truth is our God.